The prisoner that wouldn't break the cell was cold and humming with alien energy fields, but the human inside sat still with his head tilted slightly as if he was amused by something that no one else could hear. His hands were bound by gravitational cuffs, his face bloodied from interrogation, but his eyes calm, steady, watching every movement outside the force field. With the gaze of a predator, not prey, the alien warlord General Creel paced back and forth, claws tapping against the metal floor. His guards stood tense behind him, afraid not of the prisoner, but of what was happening to them. One by one they had started dreaming things, nightmares, waking in cold terror. Images of Earth cities burning, not by war, but by some unseen rage creatures that were not creatures, just humans walking through fire, without fear, dying without sound, rising again in the dark with eyes glowing red. None of the other species ever made them feel this way. Creel turned to the human, his voice laced with fury and confusion. We have broken warriors with titanium bones. We have erased memories from creatures older than the stars, but you sit there smiling, as if you are not the one in chains. The human slowly raised his head, a small grin on his bruised face, and whispered again, the same thing he had whispered for 3 days now. They're coming for me. Creel slammed his fist into the wall and ordered another round of scans. Neuro burns, psychic suppression, pain beams. Nothing worked. The human's vitals remained steady even when his skin blistered, even when the air was pulled from the room. He stared through the wall as if he was seeing something far away. The guards exchanged nervous glances. One whispered that his sister had seen a shadow over their home planet last night, just a blur in the sky, but then half the city lost power, and no one could explain it. Another said he heard a signal bouncing across comms, a voice speaking in a language that cracked the encryption in seconds, and then disappeared. Creel ignored them. He didn't believe in human myths. He didn't believe in the old warnings that the elders used to say before the Empire rose about the one race that could not be conquered, only survived, only adapted. He stepped into the cell, lowering the shield for just a moment, and grabbed the human by the collar, snarling, "Who is coming? What are they?" The human leaned forward until his cracked lips touched Creel's ear and said one sentence that froze the general's hearts. "We are." What happens when prey decides to stop running? Creel backed away, but too slow, too late. The lights flickered once, then again. The entire facility trembled with a low sound like a hum from the deep belly of a star. Something old, something massive. Orbit readings screamed. Something had dropped from FTL just outside the moon's shadow, but nothing could be seen, not by their scanners, not by their eyes, except the human, who now stood up straight, pulling against the cuffs as if they were threads. He looked into the security cam and said, "I told you they were coming." The guards panicked, shouting for backup, but communications were jammed. Creel ran to the screen, watching the orbital feed as something invisible blocked out the stars, a shape not of metal or stone, but something cloaked in quantum shadows. Every satellite camera began to die one by one, not with an explosion, just silence, and then darkness. The human walked calmly out of the cell, the locks deactivating around him, the doors opening without command systems glitching in patterns not random, but intentional. The facility AI stuttered, then began speaking in Earth Standard, saying, "Evacuation is not advised. Repeat, do not attempt escape. All staff will be detained for retrieval." Creel screamed into his comms, but no answer came, no voices. Only that same hum growing louder through the ground, through their bones, as if the planet itself was being judged. The human reached the main hall, where a wall display still showed Earth's profile with warning tags and labels: threat level minimal, psychological instability, social fragmentation. The human stopped and stared at it, then reached out and touched the screen. The label changed, the tags vanished. The threat level now read class Omega, contact forbidden under galactic law. The guards tried to fire, but their weapons locked up, safety systems overridden. The human didn't move. He didn't need to. Something unseen moved behind him in the dark, a shimmer like heat above pavement. Then a shadow walked forward out of the air, itself armor blacker than void, eyes burning like suns. It looked at the human and nodded, then looked at the guards and said one word in their language: "Forget." They collapsed, screaming as their memories bled out through their minds, and the human walked past them, whispering again and again, "They're coming for me." And now they are Herichos of the Forgotten War. The command chamber of the Zarn Dominion's war archive was buried beneath layers of quantum shielding, far beyond the reach of normal signals or physical entry. Yet it flickered nervously as General Creel's emergency request bypassed every level of clearance and security and forced itself through the system. The Council of Historians, pale and shaking, watched as encrypted video logs played across the curved walls, showing the last moments of Facility 7, where Creel and his team vanished along with their prized human captive. No explosions, no traces, just silence followed by static and then total black. The head archivist A four-eyed scholar named Voltic ordered access to restricted files, those locked by ancient codes, predating the current empire, written in languages no longer spoken except by machines. Even then, the machine that unlocked the file hesitated for a full 20 seconds, as if deciding whether to obey. Then it whispered softly, "The archive you seek is not recommended to view by any species under council protection." Voltic demanded it anyway, and the chamber darkened, and the oldest file began to play. The footage was grainy, distorted, as if time itself had tried to erase it, but what remained sent a cold wave through the room. It showed the early contact wars long before the Galactic Treaty, back when the humans were considered a young and reckless race, barely spacefaring. They had no advanced technology, no empire, no allies, but they had something else, something that every species who fought them remembered in silence and fear. They had unpredictability. In one clip, a human soldier charged an enemy mech with nothing but a steel pipe, screaming a war song from a culture the aliens couldn't identify. The mech fell. The pilot was never recovered. In another, a human pilot sent false signals through dead channels, bouncing them off asteroid debris to trick a fleet into firing on itself. When the truth was discovered, it was already too late. Entire destroyers gone, not by force, but by trickery, strategy, madness. The historians watched as file after file displayed missions where human units, outnumbered, outgunned, and often wounded, still prevailed, not through brute strength, but through actions no algorithm could predict. The old warning flashed across the screen in red, written by the Uxari, the most logic-driven species in history and long extinct now. The warning read: do not engage humans in war, do not attempt mind control, do not simulate fear. It will not work. Humans fear differently. They adapt to pain. They evolve under pressure. Their strength is not in what they build, it is in what they endure. Voltic turned to the others, sweat dripping from his temple, his voice shaking. This information was hidden from us for a reason. We were told the humans were contained, but these records suggest we never contained them. We just stopped poking the cage. He requested visual logs. From Earth itself, the planet was labeled high-risk red zone, but still no recent contact had occurred for centuries, only probes which never returned. He pulled the last known image of Earth and saw nothing but clouds and ocean swirling in silence. No signs of cities, no signs of life, but one data stream glitched and flickered, then showed for half a second. A massive structure in orbit, invisible to all sensors, a ring that pulsed with energy. Not built like any known station, its architecture ancient and new at once, humming with technology that should not exist. Voltic froze, replayed it, enhanced, and stopped breathing. It was not a station. It was a scar carved into space itself, a weapon, maybe a monument, maybe both. The historians began to whisper among themselves stories they thought were myths, tales of humans who walked alone into battlefields and left with no survivors, of laughter heard in the void. Just before an entire enemy fleet lost contact, one elder voice said, "I once saw a Terran ghost. He smiled at me, then disappeared. Our systems recorded no life form, but my mind never forgot." Voltic paced, trying to make sense of it. He spoke aloud. If the humans were so dangerous, why did they vanish? Why did they stop? The answer came from the AI, sifting through the oldest codes. It said they did not stop. They waited and watched and warned. The last transmission received from human command before the silence read, "This galaxy belongs to everyone, but if you make it yours, by blood we will make it ours." By memory, Creel's footage replayed one final time. The human whispering, "They're coming for me." The last second showed the impossible. The prison lights bending, space warping reality, not from tech, but from presence. Something waking, something old. The historians stood in silence until one young assistant finally asked the question that was burning in all their minds. "If they are coming, what can we do to stop them?" Voltic turned, eyes full of a fear that no wisdom could erase, and said, "We cannot stop them. We can only hope they have forgotten what we did to them." The rescue that burned smooth skies above Zaret's fourth moon were always dark-coated in a swirling field of ash and plasma from a long-dead volcanic system, and the Zarn Dominion had chosen it specifically for that reason, because its natural storms helped hide things they did not want. Seen things like black sites, secret facilities, interrogation chambers, and a graveyard for anyone who challenged their authority. But on this night, the moon's silence cracked open, not from battle, not from explosions, but from an arrival that no one could explain. A shape that made no sound, yet made every camera lens tremble. A shape that was not there, yet was unmistakably real. It hovered above the ridge where Facility 7 had been, its presence bending clouds, its size impossible to measure. And then, in one moment that passed faster than a thought, the moon itself wept fire, a blinding streak of energy. No beam, no projectile, just a radiant flare that rippled downward, not to destroy the landscape, but to erase it like chalk wiped from a board. The entire facility vaporized in less than a second, including all its guards' weapons. Buildings' memories replaced by a smooth glass crater that pulsed with heat, yet held no radiation, no evidence, no survivors, no remains. Orbiting patrol ships scrambled to respond, but their systems locked, their engines refused to obey their feeds, showing nothing but static, their own AI whispering only one phrase: incoming. Do not interfere. The ships tried to fire, but their weapons failed. Their pilots screamed, but no sound left their throats, and then a voice spoke through every device across the region, a calm human voice, young and confident, not angry, not vengeful, but absolute. It said, "The human is retrieved. Do not pursue." The message ended. The light vanished, the stars returned, and with it silence, but that silence held terror, because what had happened was not a rescue, it was a message. The Zarn command responded within minutes, broadcasting across all channels for assistance, warning of hostile human engagement, expecting retaliation, expecting invasion, but nothing came, not for an hour, not for a day, only silence and static and fear. The Dominion's top strategist, High Warden Soren, gathered his council and watched the crater feed again and again, trying to make sense of what had just happened. One advisor said, "Perhaps it was a dreadnought cloaked with tech we don't understand." Another said, "Perhaps it was a new alliance, perhaps Earth had joined with the Illyrians or the Vantheran." But Soren shook his head. None of them would erase a site with such precision. None of them would rescue just one man and leave without a trace. The humans did this alone, and not out of necessity, but by choice, because it was not a battle, it was a demonstration. The council argued for hours about defense strategies, about diplomacy, about retaliation, but the problem was clear. Nothing had been seen, nothing had been touched. No warnings had been issued, and no trace had been left. The Dominion had spent centuries building its fleets, its ground armies, its orbital systems, yet none of it mattered, because whatever had taken their prisoner had done so with a flicker of presence and a single act of light. Soren ordered all records of human encounters to be reclassified under highest threat level. He ordered diplomatic feelers to Earth and nearby systems, but every probe sent toward Terran space failed to return. Not shut down, not hacked, just gone, removed from time, from space, from data. He reviewed the log of last known human colony reports. Most were outdated, most were classified as extinct or absorbed, yet now that list shimmered with doubt. One entry stood out, a warning from 200 years ago from a cargo vessel that passed near an old Terran listening post. Its crew had heard a signal through deep space, an old Earth song playing in perfect clarity, followed by a message in hundreds of languages, saying, "We do not start wars, we end them." Then silence. The ship never reported again. Soren leaned forward, his claws tapping against the metal console. He whispered to himself, "This is not just rescue, this is ritual. They do not forget, and they do not forgive, and if they still roam the stars, then our past sins will be our future punishment." He looked at the display again. The moon's surface now cooled into black glass, and knew this was only the beginning, because when a species comes to take back its own without asking, without warning, without loss, it means only one thing: they are beyond war, beyond peace, beyond fear, and what comes next is not negotiation, it is memory sharpened into vengeance. Seed species that doesn't fear death. Central biointelligence hub of the Zorath Coalition buzzed with encrypted chatter as 50 worlds tried to process the blackout, the glassed moon, the one human retrieval that came like a ghost and left a scar deeper than any war. And the question rising louder than any alert across the galactic network was the same: how can they do this with no warning, with no fleet, with no bloodshed? How do humans fight without fighting, and why do they not fear death? No one had answers, so they turned to the records, not the official ones, but the silent libraries, the forbidden data cubes passed down by those who once fought humans and survived or claimed, to the ones who lost whole crews and returned hollow from the inside, whispering of Earth's shadow soldiers, not assassins, not machines, but people who walked into battlefields singing, crying, laughing, even in pain. The AI of the Coalition filtered through the testimonies, and one surfaced from the old Minari front, a war that never officially existed, where a human unit was surrounded by 400 bio-armored warriors deep in a frozen valley, oxygen levels falling, food gone, and still they sent a final message, not a surrender, not a prayer, just a video of them dancing to music from a device held above their heads. One soldier saluted the camera, said, "We're not gonna make it, but damn it, we'll make it beautiful." Then static. 3 days later, the enemy battalion was found frozen to death. No signs of violence, no injuries, just faces twisted in horror, eyes wide as if they saw something they could not explain. The human bodies were not there, only melted ground, and a single message burned into the ice: never corner a human, it is where they bloom. The Zorath analysts were shaken. This was not strategy, it was not madness, it was something else, the ability to embrace the end, not as a defeat, but as a transition, a push forward, not away from life, but into something new, a transformation. Every species avoids death. Some extend life through science, others transfer minds into machines. But humans do not run, they lean into it, they stare it down and smile, and sometimes they invite it closer, not to fall, but to rise with it. The Coalition accessed more logs footage from Earth's own history, ancient wars before space travel, battles where humans knew they would lose and fought anyway, stories of last stands where entire units held ground just to let others escape, sacrificing everything and doing so with no regret, only duty and love. And sometimes jokes. In one clip, a dying pilot in a crash recorded himself saying, "Tell my dog I love her, and till death I'll race him to the stars." Then he laughed and the screen went black. The room of strategists sat in silence, not because they feared humans as enemies, but because they feared the fact that humans don't fear loss, and that made them unbreakable. One scientist, a behavioral empath, spoke softly. If they do not fear pain or death or defeat, then what do they fear? What stops them? The answer came not from data but from the oldest voice in the room, a retired war tactician who had once been stationed near an old Terran Alliance world. He spoke slowly, as if remembering something buried. Humans fear one thing: the moment they have nothing left to protect. If you hurt what they love, you do not. When you awaken something, their rage is not blind, it is focused, it is methodical, it is terrifying, and it does not fade with time. It grows, it learns, it remembers, and it waits. The Zorath Council realized then that what happened on the moon was not about one man, it was a test, a message, and possibly the first move in something far older, a memory waking across the stars with steps so quiet you would only hear them when it was already too late. And the humans themselves had not spoken, they had not claimed vengeance or power, they had simply acted, because for them war was never about destruction, it was about reminder, a reminder that they once survived worse and that pain had never broken them, it had built them. So now across the galaxy, the species who once thought Earth was silent began to feel the silence differently, not as peace, but as breath held before a storm. And deep inside every command center, every war room, every sleeping mind, the same vision came: a single human standing alone, eyes calm, hands empty, and behind them a shadow of fire, shaped like 1,000 others, not ghosts, not soldiers, not monsters, just people, and all of them smiling. The monster we created, Zarnathian deep research citadel, was hidden inside a dying star, surrounded by gravitational pulses so violent no natural life could survive nearby. But inside its reinforced chambers, a single truth had begun to unfold, and it was not born from prophecy or intelligence reports. It came from the mouth of Dr. Yiran, a senior xenogeneticist who had studied human biology for 80 cycles and who now stood before the Dominion High Board with eyes sunken and voice trembling. "We made them," he said, "not in the way a parent builds a child, but in the way a hand sharpens a blade, unaware that the blade remembers every strike." The council demanded clarity, and he gave it with sorrow drawn across every word. He explained that in the early days of galactic uplift, before the Treaty of Races, many empires selected primitive species to observe, to experiment, to nudge toward development. Some chose peaceful herbivores, some chose aquatic thinkers, but the Zarnathians chose Earth not for its potential, but for its chaos. "We wanted to see what evolution would do to a violent world where predators never died, and the air itself could kill," he said. "Earth was already brutal, but we enhanced it subtly. We seeded war pulses into the atmosphere, low radiation to raise aggression, slight magnetic tweaks to alter emotional regulation, even released by O-stress agents in water cycles, to see how long the species would last. The experiment was to run for 200 rotations, but it never stopped because something happened that no one predicted. Humans adapted, not slowly, not across generations, but fast, impossibly fast. The more pressure we placed on them, the more they changed, and not just in body, but in mind and spirit. Their nervous systems learned to store trauma and convert it into reflex. Their eyes began reading danger before it appeared. Their memory evolved to carry pain across lifetimes. Passed through art, stories, genetics, we introduced diseases, and they built cures. We brought war, and they made peace with fists. We broke their nations, and they redrew the world with pens. We gave them fear, and they turned it into curiosity, then into defiance." The board was silent until one asked if this was just survival. Dr. Yiran shook his head. "No, this was escalation." Humans did not just resist, they absorbed the very things meant to break them, and turned those into tools, weapons, armor, and most terrifying of all, into identity. They do not just survive pain, they use it like fire. The head minister stood and demanded to know why these records were buried. Yiran looked down and said, "Because we were ashamed. We meant to craft a dying world, but instead we awakened a species That cannot be undone. The next set of data displayed showed results from captured Terran. Soldiers from wars past all showed remarkable similarities. High resistance to pain, rapid adaptation to alien environments. But most disturbing was the neural pattern when subjected to memory probes. Instead of showing trauma, it showed reinforcement. The more you forced them to recall pain, the more stable their minds became. They did not forget pain. They anchored themselves in it. In one test, a soldier smiled during a simulation of his own death, and said this again before shattering the probe, with his bare thoughts and vanishing without a trace. The board demanded a halt to all human experimentation. They were too dangerous, unpredictable, too costly, but it was too late, because Earth was no longer silent, and if they had returned as recent events showed, then they did so not to demand answers, but to deliver consequences, and not in rage, but in precision. Dr. Yiren ended his speech with one final log entry. From an ancient field unit stationed on Mars before it fell, the human girl watched. Her city burned. She did not scream. She picked up a rock, drew a line in the dust, and said, "You will remember us, and if you forget, we will remind you." The line stayed visible for 40 years, even after storms, even after the surface changed. The dust never covered it, and now that line is everywhere across our archives, in the dreams of our soldiers, in the void between our stars. We tried to craft a creature of instinct and fury, but what we made instead was a people of memory and fire, and they are awake now, and they are watching. The last broadcast Galactic Emergency Summit was called in less than 2 standard hours after 3 outer colonies of the Othari Empire vanished, not exploded, not invaded, just gone. Every structure, every signal, every heartbeat replaced with silence and static. When scout ships arrived to investigate, they found the soil undisturbed, no signs of entry, no weapons, no burns, only a strange circular imprint in the center of each settlement, as if something too large to comprehend had touched the planet for only a moment and erased a memory, not a life. And from that imprint came a signal, soft, constant, and in a child's voice. It said, "You hurt one of ours, we remember forever." The summit brought together species that had not spoken in centuries, enemies, allies, ancient rivals, all seated around a curved obsidian table orbiting a black hole chosen for secrecy and defense. But now it felt like a tomb. The speaker of the Verdari Collective opened first, voice shaking. "We can no longer treat this as isolated retaliation. This is coordinated. This is calculated, and this is human." The Andari matron leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "This cannot be humanity. We watched them fall. We marked their collapse. The last probe showed Earth burning, the air gone, the cities swallowed by time. This is not resurrection. It is something worse." The Yarrick diplomat slammed his fist against the table. "This is justice, or revenge, depending on which part of history you want to forget. We enslaved them. We tested them. We took their children and used them as translators and tools, and now they speak back with silence and fire." One projection screen activated, displaying dozens of images recovered from hidden caches. Old footage of humans walking across ruined battlefields, carrying their wounded, carrying their dead, and never stopping, always moving, always enduring. In one image, a human soldier held a child of another species, shielding it with his body despite being surrounded. His last act, not to attack but to protect, and behind him others like him. Not machines, not enhanced, not gods, just people who refused to fall when they should have. The room sat in quiet awe until the Dominion's High Inquisitor spoke. "Enough. These are images from a broken past. We need defense, not sentiment. We must counter. We must strike first. If this is a new war." The image on the screen changed. Without command, a new feed forced itself into every console, a live signal, untraceable, unscrambled, unfiltered. The lights dimmed, and the air shifted as if reality itself was leaning closer to listen. And then it spoke, a voice, soft, human, clear, a woman, not angry, not cold, simply awake. "You erased our names from your archives, but we never erased you. You burned our homes and called it victory. We buried our dead and called it memory. You made us monsters when you thought we were too small to matter, but you forgot the one truth we always carry. We build from ruin, we rise from ashen. We remember every scream you left behind." The screen flickered and began to show systems by name. Not random systems, but ones with long histories of exploiting Earth or targeting its people. Ancient colonies, now wealthy planets, now capitals, and beside each name a number appeared, a countdown, not a threat, not a demand, just a silent clock ticking forward, and above them all the same sentence repeated: "We do not want war, but we are no longer asking for peace." The signal ended. The silence that followed was suffocating. Some demanded full evacuation, some called for surrender, others wanted to plead for mercy, but none could agree, because the fear was not just of death. It was of being forgotten, of becoming a line in a story told to children as a warning: never harm a human or you will vanish like the ones Who did the summit ended with no vote, no resolution, only fear and quiet as the countdowns continued. And in every hallway across every empire the last broadcast echoed in whispers, from soldier to child to elder, because now the galaxy knew humans had not come back to fight. They had come back to remind, and memory it seemed was sharper than any blade. Why their terror feed in the dark corridor of an ancient research outpost. Carved into the rings of a dead gas giant, a young alien cadet named Kier stood with shaking hands, listening to the old veteran whisper stories that no one dared record. Anymore the room was silent save for the hum of life support, and the echo of stories too heavy to forget. The veteran spoke slowly, eyes dim with memories that refused to fade. He said, "You want to know why we whisper their name, why we flinch when someone jokes about Earth, why entire fleets turn around when they see a single Terran signature? It's not because they are stronger, they're not bigger, smarter, or more advanced. We all have weapons, faster ships, better shields. We all build fleets. They build graves." The cadet stared wide-eyed. "But sir, they're extinct, aren't they? The data shows no new colonies, no signals from their homeworld." The veteran gave a dry laugh, the kind that doesn't mean humor, the kind that means pain and survival. "No, they are not extinct. They are watching, they are waiting, and they are remembering, always remembering. You see, they are not a species like us. We move on. We forget wars and betrayals. We sign treaties and rewrite history. They don't. Every Terran child is raised not on stories of glory, but on stories of loss, of pain, of promises made to ghosts, of lessons carved into bone. They don't teach peace, they teach what happens when it is broken. And they do not teach forgiveness, they teach memory." The cadet tried to speak, but the words stuck, so the veteran continued, his voice lower now. "Like a secret passed between stars, we took one of theirs, and what happened next was not a rescue. It was a judgment, not a war, a correction. Entire moons vanished. Not bombed, just removed like stains, scrubbed clean from time itself. Messages came not from generals, but from children, from songs, from dreams, and when they stopped we were already too late. They do not fight in numbers, they fight in principles. If you hurt one of them, you have declared war on something older than vengeance, more patient than time. They are not trying to destroy us, they are trying to ensure that no one ever tries. What we tried." Again the cadet swallowed. "But sir, what do we do? How do we stop them? How do we survive?" The veteran looked at him, then leaned close and whispered, "You don't stop them, you respect them, you leave them alone. You speak their name with honor, and you tell others never touch a human, never lie to one, never take from them what they hold dear, because if you do they will not just come for you, they will come for the idea of you, for the memory of your name, for the stars that sheltered you, and they will erase it all, not with hatred but with resolve. And that is why the galaxy is terrified of them, not because they are angry, but because they are calm, not because they kill, but because they remember and never stop." The cadet nodded slowly, not in understanding, but in fear and awe. He stepped out into the observation deck, watching the stars burn quietly across the void, and for the first time, he truly felt the weight of history, of stories buried under pride and silence, of worlds lost to whispers of those who came before him, who forgot and were forgotten. The stars looked back, unblinking, unmoved, and somewhere out there, behind that cold curtain of light, a single Terran ship drifted, cloaked in silence and purpose, not hunting, not hiding, just remembering, waiting, watching, and reminding all who dared forget that humans do not end, they endure. A final part. Why the galaxy will never forget Humanson, the farthest edge of the galaxy, beyond mapped systems and known stars. There is a place no ship enters willingly, a silent region called the Hollow Drift, where signals vanish, where probes return empty, if they return at all. It is there that a forgotten satellite still floats, broken, scarred, powered by a core older than any living empire. Inside it, a single message loops endlessly, written in every language ever spoken across the stars. It says, "Remember Earth, not for its beauty, not for its violence, but for its memory. They are not the strongest, not the fastest, not the oldest, but they are the most dangerous, because they never forget and they never surrender." In the great halls of new civilizations, the story is told of the one prisoner taken by force who smiled and whispered, "They are coming." And when they came, they did not roar, they did not burn, they simply arrived, removed, erased, reminded, and left, leaving behind only silence and the knowledge that some shadows do not fade. They wait, they grow, they become storms inside minds and stories and bloodlines. And no barrier, no council, no weapon can stop what they bring, because what they bring is memory sharpened into justice in every academy, every ship, every council. The phrase is now law: never harm a human, never claim a human, never silence a human. Because if you do not face war, you face extinction, not of body, but of name, of history, of voice. They will take nothing and leave nothing, because that is how they ensure no one ever tries again. It is not vengeance, it is legacy. And now across the stars their name is not spoken in fear, but in reverence, not because they demand it, but because they earned it. And as new species rise and ask who are the humans, the stars answer not with fire, not with sound, but with silence, and every being who hears it knows. That silence is not empty, it is full of everything. The galaxy learned too late and still remembers the end.